Loving an empath is like being caught in the middle of an emotional storm. It is beautiful, overwhelming, and deeply intense all at once. One minute you're experiencing a level of connection and intimacy that feels almost psychic, and the next you feel like you are standing on the outside looking in, wondering how to reach someone who seems a million miles away. If you have ever felt like your partner is a complex puzzle you just cannot solve, or if you find yourself constantly trying to figure out why they pull away when you need them most, you are not alone. It is a confusing cycle that leaves many people feeling exhausted, unappreciated, and deeply misunderstood. Many people assume that because empaths are naturally caring and sensitive, a relationship with them should be easy. But the truth is much more complicated. Their ability to feel everything at a high volume is both their greatest gift and the very thing that makes them so incredibly hard to love. They don't just love you, they feel your stress, your doubt, and your joy, often before you even acknowledge those feelings yourself. This creates a unique pressure on the relationship that isn't present with anyone else. You might feel like you are walking on eggshells, or that you are constantly competing for their attention against the emotional weight of the entire world. Today, we are going to cut through that noise. We are not just going to talk about why they are difficult. We are going to pull back the curtain on how their minds actually work. We will break down the 8 specific habits that create distance in your relationship, explain why your empath partner acts the way they do, and show you how these exact traits, which feel like walls right now, are actually the foundations of a powerful, authentic, and life-changing love. If you want to stop guessing and start understanding, you are in exactly the right place. 1. The need for isolation. To understand why an empath suddenly pulls away, you have to realize that they are literal emotional sponges. They don't just watch what's happening in a room, they physically soak up the feelings of everyone around them. Imagine walking through a crowd where you can feel the anxiety of a stranger, the underlying sadness of a coworker, and the hidden frustration of a friend, all at the same time. For an empath, that isn't just a thought, it is a physiological experience. Their nervous system is constantly dialed up to the highest level of sensitivity, taking in data that everyone else is successfully filtering out. When they retreat into what you might call hermit mode, it isn't a rejection of your company or a sign that they are losing interest in the relationship. It is a vital survival mechanism. Their battery doesn't drain in the same way yours does. It gets cluttered by external noise. Think of it like a computer with 1,000 tabs open, all running at the same time until the system crashes. They aren't trying to hide from you. They are trying to clear their internal cache so they can function again. They need that silence in physical space to offload the heavy, often negative energy they've accumulated throughout the day. If you're an extrovert or simply someone who thrives on constant interaction, this behavior is incredibly easy to misinterpret. You might see their silence as coldness or their need for space as a lack of commitment. It is natural to feel slighted when you want to connect and they seem to be shutting the door in your face. But you have to shift your perspective. Their withdrawal is actually the most responsible thing they can do for the relationship. They are stepping away to perform necessary maintenance on their emotional health, because they know they cannot give you the best version of themselves while they are vibrating with someone else's stress. Ultimately, their need for isolation is a paradox. They're withdrawing not to get away from you, but to get back to themselves so that they can eventually show up for you again. If you force them to stay when they are reaching their limit, you will only get a version of them that is irritable, exhausted, and completely overwhelmed. By giving them the grace to disappear for an hour or an evening, you are giving them the gift of restoration. Once they have successfully recalibrated and found their own center again, they will come back to you fully present, recharged, and ready to pour their energy back into the relationship. 2. The yes trap. The most frustrating hurdle you will face when dating an empath is their absolute inability to say no. To you, it looks like they are constantly prioritizing everyone else, but to them, saying no feels like causing physical harm to someone else. They are hardwired with a hyperactive sense of responsibility, often feeling as if they are the designated fixer for every person they encounter. Whether it is a coworker asking for a favor that clearly isn't their job, a distant friend calling with a crisis, or even a random acquaintance needing a shoulder to cry on, the empath feels an intense internal pull to step in and help. They view this as their duty, a quiet code they live by that makes them feel valuable and needed. The real conflict happens when this trait clashes with the needs of your relationship. You might be looking forward to a quiet night in, a date, or simply some quality time, only to find that your partner has exhausted all their energy solving a problem for someone else. Because they treat every request as an emergency, they rarely differentiate between people who truly need their help and people who are just taking advantage of their kindness. They give their time, their emotional labor, and their patience away for free, often leaving the tank completely empty by the time they get back to you. It creates a painful sense of inequality, where you feel like you are getting the leftovers of their energy rather than the best version of it. You have to understand that this behavior isn't a lack of love for you. It is a lack of boundaries with the world. They genuinely struggle to see where they end and where other people begin. In their mind, helping someone else is just doing the right thing, and they often don't realize until it is too late that they have neglected their own peace and, by extension, their partner. It feels like they are treating everyone, strangers, friends, and you, with the same level of urgency. This makes you feel less special and less of a priority, leading to feelings of resentment that can quietly poison the relationship if it isn't addressed. If you are going to survive this dynamic, you have to realize that you cannot change their nature, but you can change how you communicate about it. They are not intentionally ignoring you. They are simply trapped in a cycle of people-pleasing that they haven't learned to break. Instead of viewing their helpfulness as a rejection of your relationship, try to view it as a broken boundary system that they haven't yet mastered. They need to learn that their energy is a finite resource, and until they realize that they don't owe the world their soul, they will keep running on empty. It is a slow process of helping them see that by saying yes to everyone else, they are effectively saying no to the health of the one relationship that actually matters most. 3. The parent complex. At some point in your relationship, you might suddenly feel like you've transitioned from being a partner to being a student, or worse, a child. This is the parent complex, and it is one of the most frustrating dynamics you will ever encounter with an empath. Because empaths are hypersensitive to their environment, they have a natural, almost involuntary talent for spotting where things are going wrong. They see the cracks in your plans, the holes in your logic, or the flaws in your habits, and they feel a compulsive, burning need to fix them. They don't see this as being pushy. They see it as an act of service, believing that by pointing out your mistakes or offering unsolicited guidance, they are helping you become the best version of yourself. However, the intention behind their words rarely matches the impact they have on your ego. When they step into this teacher-preacher role, the balance of the relationship shifts instantly. Instead of standing side by side as equals, they are now standing over you, looking down from a position of assumed wisdom. Even if their advice is technically correct, it feels incredibly condescending. It tells you, without them saying a word, that they think you are incapable of figuring things out on your own. For you, this is a major turnoff that kills the mystery and the equality that romance depends on. You don't want a mentor or a parent. You want a partner who respects your process, even when you make mistakes. What makes this even harder is that they honestly have no idea how arrogant they come across. They are so focused on the solution they've found that they completely miss the emotional damage they are causing in the process. They treat you with the same clinical diagnostic eye that they use to analyze the world around them, often ignoring the fact that you aren't a project to be managed. This can lead to a cycle where they lecture, you get defensive, and they get confused and frustrated because they think they were just trying to help. It is a recipe for constant, unnecessary friction that makes you feel small and unseen. To move past this, you have to realize that this behavior is a projection of their own internal anxiety, because they feel responsible for everything happening in their surroundings. They feel an overwhelming pressure to ensure everything is, quote, correct, so that they can finally feel at ease. By trying to, quote, fix you, they are really trying to reduce the chaos in their own mind. It is a deeply misguided attempt to create safety. Once you understand that their lecturing is actually a sign of their own struggle to let go of control, you can stop taking it as a personal attack. You need to set a firm boundary. Tell them that while you appreciate their perspective, you need them to be your partner, not your teacher, so that the two of you can get back to simply enjoying each other. 4. Brutal honesty. When you are in a relationship, you often rely on those little, harmless, white lies to keep the day-to-day peace. Maybe you tell your partner you love the new outfit, or you gloss over a minor conflict just to avoid a fight. With an empath, however, that social lubricant simply doesn't exist. To them, honesty isn't just a preference, it is a moral requirement. They view the truth as the only foundation upon which a real connection can be built. And they operate on the belief that if they aren't being 100% transparent with you, they are essentially lying to themselves. This means they will often bypass your need for comfort and go straight for the reality of the situation, no matter how uncomfortable that reality might be. This level of radical honesty can feel like a direct, sharp attack on your ego in the moment. When you are feeling vulnerable and looking for validation or support, hearing the unvarnished truth about your own shortcomings or a situation can sting deeply. It doesn't feel like they are being helpful. It feels like they are being needlessly harsh, or worse, completely indifferent to your feelings. You might find yourself wishing they would just play along or tell you what you want to hear for once, but an empath is psychologically incapable of doing that. They feel that by lying to you, even to spare your feelings, they are disrespecting your intelligence and the integrity of the bond you share. The frustration is compounded by the fact that they are usually right, which makes it even harder to defend yourself. Because they are so tuned in to the emotional undercurrents of everything, they often see things you are trying to hide from yourself. When they point out the elephant in the room, or tell you exactly why a plan is doomed to fail, they aren't trying to tear you down. They're trying to clear the air of the fakeness that they find suffocating. For them, being able to say the hard thing is the ultimate sign of commitment. They are showing you that they care enough about your future to risk your current anger, even if that risk makes them feel like the bad guy in your eyes. Over the long term, this habit creates a foundation of absolute ironclad trust. You eventually learn that you never have to guess where you stand with them, because they will always give you the raw truth. There is a deep underlying safety in knowing that you will never be gaslit or kept in the dark by someone who refuses to be anything but authentic. However, in the heat of the moment, it requires a thick skin. To handle an empath's honesty, you have to separate your ego from the facts. If you can learn to hear their words without letting your immediate defensiveness take over, you will realize that their brutal honesty is actually their way of holding you in high enough regard to treat you like a true equal. 5. Prioritizing everyone else. For an empath, the default setting is almost always set to service. It is as if they have an invisible radar that is constantly scanning the horizon for anyone in pain. And once they lock onto a distress signal, they feel a compulsive, deep-seated urge to fix it. If a friend calls with a crisis, or even if they witness a stranger struggling, your partner is likely to drop everything they are doing, including plans they have made with you, to rush to the rescue. To them, this isn't an act of neglect, it is an act of healing. They feel a genuine, physical relief when they are able to help someone else alleviate their suffering. It is who they are at their core, and they often struggle to understand why anyone would prioritize a simple dinner date over a person in genuine emotional turmoil. The problem, however, is that this selfless urge comes at a massive emotional cost. Relationships require a specific, focused kind of energy that the empath is often unknowingly giving away to the rest of the world throughout the day. By the time they have finished solving everyone else's problems, navigating their friends' dramas, and absorbing the stress of their social circle, they arrive back to you as a hollow shell. They aren't trying to ignore you or make you feel secondary. They are simply running on empty. You are left with the scraps of their patience and attention, which inevitably leads to the relationship feeling stagnant. It is a heartbreaking cycle because the very trait that makes them such a kind, magnetic person is also the very thing that prevents them from having the emotional bandwidth to truly invest in the shared life you are trying to build together. 6. Taking others' pain personally. This is perhaps the most confusing and maddening habit you will face when living with an empath. Your partner might walk through the door after a long day, and their mood is instantly, visibly sour. They might be irritable, quiet, or just completely shut down, and your immediate instinct is to look for the cause within yourself. You ask yourself, what did I do? Is it something I said? Are they mad at me? But the reality is that their mood has absolutely nothing to do with you. They have spent the last 8 hours out in the world, literally absorbing the negative energy of every unhappy, stressed, or angry person they encountered. They are carrying a heavy, invisible backpack of emotions that don't even belong to them, yet they are feeling the weight of those emotions as if they were their own personal experiences. If you try to fix their mood, you are almost guaranteed to fail. You might try to cheer them up, offer advice, or ask them what is wrong, but that usually just adds more pressure to an already overstimulated nervous system. They don't need you to provide a solution. They need you to provide a sanctuary. They need space to decompress and let those foreign emotions wash off of them like water. Trying to force them to talk or acting as if you need to solve their sadness will only make them retreat further because they are already struggling to distinguish their own feelings from the noise of the world. The best thing you can do, as difficult as it is to not take their mood as a personal rejection. Remind yourself that they aren't ignoring you. They are just overwhelmed by the energy of the world. Once they have had the time to process and shed that energy, they will be back to the person you love. But until then, they need your patience more than they need your intervention. 7. Attracting takers. Empaths are essentially emotional magnets, but unfortunately they tend to attract takers, people who aren't looking for a partner or a friend, but rather a permanent, free-of-charge emotional support system. Because an empath radiates a genuine, non-judgmental warmth, they signal to emotionally unavailable or selfish individuals that they are a safe space to dump their problems, drain energy, and take whatever they need without ever offering anything in return. The empath, blinded by their own desire to heal, often mistakes this dependence for intimacy. They believe that by giving more, they will eventually receive the love they deserve, but all they end up doing is feeding a bottomless pit. This recurring pattern creates a deep, lingering trauma that fundamentally changes how an empath approaches new relationships. After years of being used as a doormat, an empath starts to view the world through a lens of self-protection. They learn the hard way that when someone says, "I love you," it often translates to, "I love what you do for me," or "I love how you fix my life." This leads to the construction of a massive, impenetrable wall. When you encounter that wall, do not mistake it for a lack of affection or a lack of interest in you. It is a calculated, necessary defense mechanism designed to prevent them from being exploited yet again. If you feel like you are constantly working to break through their barriers, you need to understand that this is not a game or a test of your patience. It is the result of a history of betrayal. They have been conditioned to believe that exposing their soft, vulnerable center will only lead to someone taking advantage of their kindness. They are waiting to see if you are a giver who actually cares about their well-being, or if you are just another taker looking to extract their energy. They are perpetually scanning for signs of manipulation, and that guardedness is how they ensure they don't lose themselves for the 10th time. The most important thing you can realize is that their hesitation isn't about you, it's about their own past scars. You are essentially dealing with the fallout of all the people who came before you and failed to treat them with the respect they deserved. When you realize that their walls are not meant to keep you out, but to keep their own peace in, your entire perspective will shift. Instead of feeling frustrated by their coldness, you will begin to see it as a warning of how fragile their trust has become. Being the person who finally earns that trust requires infinite patience, but once you prove that you aren't there to take from them, that wall will start to come down, and you will finally get to experience the deep, authentic connection you were looking for. 8. The language gap. The final and perhaps most painful reason empaths are so hard to love is that the vast majority of the world simply doesn't try to understand them. We live in a society that values constant noise, aggressive ambition, and thick-skinned resilience, which is effectively the opposite of how an empath is wired. They view the world through a completely different frequency, picking up on subtleties, emotional undertones, and energy shifts that most people are completely blind to. When you refuse to acknowledge this, or worse, when you try to force them to function like normal people, you are creating a permanent disconnect. You cannot expect someone with an incredibly sensitive emotional antenna to operate in a world that thrives on bluntness and superficiality. And when you insist that they conform, they feel fundamentally unseen. If you want this relationship to work, you must be willing to learn their language, which is entirely different from the one most couples speak. Learning their language means respecting their deep, non-negotiable need for silence and solitude, not as an insult to your presence, but as a prerequisite for their mental clarity. It means recognizing that their extreme sensitivity to intensity, whether it is a loud argument, a chaotic environment, or even an aggressive movie, is a physical reaction, not just a preference. It means honoring their relentless drive for authenticity. They cannot tolerate fake interactions or small talk, and they need you to be honest, transparent, and real, even when it feels heavy. If you refuse to adapt to these nuances, the gap between you will only grow wider, leaving them feeling isolated even when you are sitting right next to them. Ultimately, an empath isn't looking for someone who just loves them in the conventional surface-level sense. They are looking for someone who gets them. They want a partner who validates their experience rather than dismissing it as too much or dramatic. They need a partner who sees their depth, values their intuition, and creates a safe, low-stress environment where they don't have to constantly put up their defenses. When you make the effort to understand them, you aren't just improving your relationship, You are giving them the rare, profound gift of feeling safe. That is the moment the dynamic shifts from difficult to transformational. You stop being two people living parallel lives and start becoming a partnership that is deeper, more intuitive, and more authentic than anything else. Are you currently dating an empath, or do you recognize these traits in yourself? It is a complex journey, and I'm sure you've had moments of intense frustration alongside those incredible highs. I really want to hear what your experience has been like. What has been your biggest challenge in bridging that gap? Let me know your thoughts or stories in the comments below because I read every single one of them.